I'm Weldon Jackson, Provost and Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs here at Morehouse College, and I delight in welcoming you to this public conversation as part of our King Week activities. Dan Lloyd, professor at Trinity College, asks, how does the ever-expanding mind enrich its concepts and contexts? Socrates espoused an answer which was already implied in Homer. Talk. In conversation, any topic can be brought to bear in any way on any other topic. This vast open-endedness offers a newly coined concept that means to seep into the fabric of one's life. Conversation is a bad way to learn the quadratic equation, but it is an excellent way to explore why the quadratic equation matters. If you can talk about it heatedly, ironically, seriously, urgently, lightly, nostalgically, regretfully, hopefully, critically, nonchalantly, then you can be said to really know it. Now, if Dan Lloyd is right about the centrality of conversation in intellectual development, then the quality of a liberal arts education is a consequence of the extent and quality of conversations students pursue during their college years. My boss, Dr. Robert Franklin, says that Morehouse is a place where the great conversations take place. And I delight this afternoon in welcoming you to this place where a great conversation will take place. And I should note for you that while Dr. Franklin is president of the college, his conversational impulse is really his DNA. Dr. Franklin, I would say that it's like fire shut up in your bones. You are a teacher at heart, and you join today another great teacher, Dr. Vincent Harding, to indeed pursue the topic, Renaissance men, Morehouse men, and the challenge of Martin Luther King, Jr.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to welcome you here today, and it's great to see so many students come out. I want to welcome Morehouse College students. I want to welcome students from the other Atlanta University Center schools. And I'd also like to welcome students from Atlanta Public Schools. We have here a special group tonight, and I just want them to stand up. And that is a group of high school students from Booker T. Washington High School, if you all would stand. They are here with their teachers and administrators. Of course, Booker T. Washington was the high school attended by Dr. King. I am delighted to bring you greetings on behalf of the Office of the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. Collection. As some of you know, the college acquired the collection 5 years ago, which consists of 10,000 original items belonging to Dr. King. It includes sermons and speeches, drafts of sermons, correspondence, over 1,000 books heavily annotated by Dr. King. As the director of the Office of the King Collection, one of my primary responsibilities is to create opportunities for teaching, for research, and for scholarship utilizing the collection, and also to develop programming for the campus and within the community. And tonight's public conversation is one example of the kind of programming that we hope to continue. I am just very, very happy today to bring to you Dr. Vincent Gordon Harding. Dr. Harding is an internationally known teacher, historian, theologian, activist, and just genuinely authentic, wonderful person. And we have him here today in conversation with Dr. Robert Franklin, our president. And I consider these two men to be among the world's most visionary, intellectually engaging, and deeply committed people around the issues of human rights and social justice. So I think this is going to be a very, very enlightening conversation, and the program will proceed as planned. We're going to bring up Mario Stevens. He is an English major, class of 2011, and he will introduce Dr. Vincent Harding.
Dr. Vincent Harding is a theologian, activist, and historian of the African American freedom movement. He worked alongside Dr. King as a friend and advisor, drafting some of King's most significant speeches, including the 1967 Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, delivered at Riverside Church in New York City. His belief in Dr. King's message led him to become the first director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center here in Atlanta. He also served as academic advisor to the PBS series. Eyes on the Prize, America's Civil Rights Years. He, along with his wife, founded the Veterans of Hope Project, a center for the study of religion and movements of social change. He has written a number of books on the freedom struggle in America, including There Is a River, The Black Struggle for Freedom in America, and Hope and History, Why We Must Share the Story of the Movement. I am excited to hear our president, Dr. Robert Michael Franklin, in conversation with the great man. And following the conversation, we will entertain questions for 10 minutes, so get your questions ready as the conversation goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford, for your leadership and vision in organizing an extraordinary group of activities that will honor our alumnus, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in this month and throughout this spring semester. We appreciate Dr. Crawford's leadership of the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Papers, and you will hear more about this extraordinary program and that collection and the work of Dr. Crawford, an accomplished and well-known historian in her own right, as we go forward. Thank you, Provost Jackson. Provost Jackson is a professional political scientist, and he has, of course, committed his life to providing guidance and leadership for academic programs. But the two of us were on this campus years ago, decades ago, together. And I always admired his sense of focus and his commitment and a no-nonsense approach to education. And it's a real thrill to lead Morehouse College at this time with him at my side as a colleague and a great conversation partner. Mario, thank you for your words of introduction. You only embody the 2,650 men of Morehouse who inhabit this campus and who bring such enormous life and promise to our village and to the entire nation, to the global village. With that said, and with those who have been acknowledged, I want to thank all of the faculty who are supporting this event, all of the students and classes who are here, obviously to alumni, too many to identify by name. We're delighted you're here, and to distinguished guests. Of course, to these extraordinary students from Booker T. Washington High School. Thank you for reminding us of our linkage as we talk about Dr. King to the life on Auburn Avenue, that extraordinary village, and Dr. King's pilgrimage from Auburn Avenue and where he was reared to Booker T. Washington, the first black high school here in the city of Atlanta, and then on here to Morehouse College. So it's wonderful institutional linkages here as well. And a special privilege to occupy the stage, share the stage with my friend and teacher and conversation partner of many years. I met Dr. Harding as a student myself at the University of Chicago. At the time that I was a doctoral student at Chicago, there were no African-American faculty on the School of Divinity's faculty. And so whenever there was word that an African-American faculty person or lecturer was coming to campus, that was my cue to be on the front row and to engage that visitor to the extent possible. And so, Vincent, I recall that wintry, probably a Black History occasion in Swift Hall when you visited Chicago, and your words were so compelling, and your spirit so attractive as a learned person, but a person of great humility and deep wisdom with a commitment to activism. And it's somewhere in me I said, this is the kind of guy I want to be when I grow up. And so it's a special privilege to be with you and to have known your family, an extraordinary and wonderful wife, and your offspring. And it's just a real blessing to be here. And so I thank you back to Morehouse. Welcome back to Morehouse College. As you and I talked about this, I just want to offer a comment and then yield to you, because we talked about offering brief remarks and then opening the conversation to engage the audience as quickly as possible. We talked about this topic of Morehouse men, Renaissance men, Martin Luther King, and his challenge to America. And I acknowledged that in 2007, before I arrived at Morehouse as president that July, I was reflecting on how I would interpret the importance and significance of Morehouse College as the nation's only college devoted to the education of African American men. And I looked at the lives of prominent alumni like Howard Thurman, Mordecai Wyatt Johnson, Samuel Du Bois Cook, Martin Luther King Jr., Lerone Bennett, and I sat with them. And this is an exercise you would invite your listeners and your audiences to. Just sit with them quietly, sit in their presence. So I underwent this intellectual, spiritual exercise. I said, what would it be like to share a breakfast table and Howard Thurman and Mordecai Johnson and Martin Luther King, and these folk are there at the table with me. And I could, of course, sit there and listen and bask on the wisdom present. And one of the images that emerged as I saw these gentlemen present was that they were all Renaissance men, that commonly used term to talk about persons who are broadly educated, persons who have a Catholic intellect. That word Catholic with a small c, referring to universal in Latin, Catholic, a universal appeal, a universal intellect. But there was something different, because as I sat with Mordecai Johnson, Howard Thurman, Dr. King, Benjamin Mays, I realized that other schools could make claims to preparing men, women who were well-read, well-spoken, well-traveled, well-dressed, well-balanced. Oxford University, Harvard University, many others could say, we also prepare Renaissance men, Renaissance women. And I said, but there's something different about the men at this table who attended a small school that had a great impact. What was that? And I realized it was that they also carried with them a social conscience. So the vision and the language of Morehouse is a school that produces Renaissance men with social conscience emerged from an exercise in reflection and prayer that you helped to inspire, Dr. Harding. So I really want to use this occasion to give you some credit for that phrase with which I began. And the team here, from Dr. Willis Sheftall in the audience, who served as interim provost, to Fran Calhoun, my chief of staff, and others, helped me grapple with this concept, and faculty members to continue to interpret it. But to become a Renaissance person, well-educated with a social conscience, means that one is constantly raising the ethical question. What is good and bad? What is right and wrong? What is praiseworthy? What is blameworthy? And as we look at policies, as institutions, at governments, at the way in which we use our money, we can bring an ethical analysis to all of them. And I think that's a part of what Morehouse men have been known for, raising the ethical analysis, raising the ethical question. And that's a part of what it means to be a Renaissance man with a social conscience. If no one else at the table asks, how are the people and the victims of Hurricane Katrina doing years later? How are the people of Haiti doing years later? And should we not do more? And must we not alter our priorities to improve the life prospects of the least advantaged members of the human community? So for me, that is the legacy, that is the foundation, that is the work we are doing together, Dr. Harding, as a Morehouse community. We are engaged in a renaissance, and I hope it will be contagious. I hope it will give life to not only the 2,700 students who are here, or the 160 faculty who teach, or the over 400 staff, or the 15,000 alumni who are Morehouse men, but that it will ignite a new awareness of our global ethical responsibilities in the larger world. That's what Dr. King did. That's what you have done. And I look forward to the enlightenment that will flow from our conversation. And with that, I turn to you, Dr. Harding.
Well, I am very, very glad to be here with my younger brother, my nephew, my son, and my student. And it's a great privilege. And as you remember, we did a lot of talking at one point about whether you should come back to Atlanta from all the things that you were doing in other places. And when I finally heard that you were not only back in Atlanta, but here at Morehouse, I was just very, very glad. I was glad because I knew that the kind of issue that you are raising in this Renaissance man with a social conscience was the kind of issue that I feel we must be talking about now. That there is no purpose for a Morehouse, for a Spelman, for an AU center if we are not dealing with those kinds of issues. And that's why I suggested that to talk about Renaissance man, to talk about Morehouse man, to talk about social conscience, let's talk a little bit about King and what he means to all of those definitions. So I want to, in a sense, push the conversation by asking you to think with me, and maybe for many of us to think together about this King. As you know, I had the privilege not of graduating with him like my brother Sam. I'm so glad to see you here, Sam, and so glad to know that you're still among the students. I had the privilege of knowing Martin for the last 10 years of his life, from 58 to 68. And we were involved in many hopes and dreams and struggles together. Right now, as I think of the ways that we engage Martin in this process of social conscience, I want to remind us, Bob, of what Martin had to say about his own social conscience. And I want to remind us of the fact that that social conscience did not arise out of reading documents about social conscience. That the social conscience came out of engaging in the life of the society, of the people, and I think especially about Martin's going to Chicago after the great victories of the Selma to Montgomery campaign and the winning of the vote as he engaged with all of those thousands and thousands of wonderful women and men who were willing to give their life for the opportunity to expand democracy in America. After that, I am struck, Bob, by the fact that Martin did not simply, after that victory, sit back and think of how wonderful he was and how wonderful life was, and perhaps go off to some quiet, joyful life, but instead went to Chicago to engage one of the most difficult urban situations that the society knew then and now. And I'm impressed with what Martin had to say as a result of his commitment in coming to Chicago and as a result of his living right there. This Morehouse man, this child of the black middle class of Atlanta, this Auburn Avenue brother, says this that I want to offer as perhaps a word about what social conscience might mean. In '66, moving deeply into Chicago's life, King says this. PhD King says this: I choose to identify with the underprivileged. I choose to identify with the poor. I choose to give my life for the hungry. I choose to give my life for those who've been left out of the sunlight of opportunity. I choose to live for and with those who find themselves seeing life as a long and desolate corridor with no exit sign. This is the way I'm going. If it means suffering a little bit, I'm going that way. If it means sacrificing, I'm going that way. If it means dying for them, I'm going that way. Because I heard a voice saying, do something for others. Now, Bob, this seems to me to be, at this point in American history, at this point in the life of black people in a special way, this matter of who will stand with the poor is really at the heart of any issues of social conscience that we want to deal with. And I am hoping, wondering, what are Morehouse men thinking about this kind of issue of social conscience as they get ready to show off a big Morehouse degree and figure out what to do with that. Let me just say another word because I could go on that. I had the wonderful privilege this afternoon of sitting with one of your Morehouse men, someone who published something in the newspaper, the Maroon Tiger, this last issue, talking about what it means to really be a man of conscience, social conscience. And what this young man told me was that he came to that position because of all the people who loved him through his childhood. And as a result of that, he knew that he had to give his best to serve the kinds of people out of whom he emerged. I want to know, what can Morehouse do to encourage that kind of social conscience? I saw an article in the newspaper that said Morehouse needs to have a requirement of community service as part of the life of the institution. Is that something that the president and his cabinet are working on? Talk to me, Bob, about where we are now and how we're going to work with our young, magnificent men to help them to see that the world is waiting for Renaissance men who are not looking primarily for the bank account, but are looking for the conscience that will change the nation.
Very provocative observations. Big question, a short answer to it. Yes, we are working on this issue, and to their credit, the men of Morehouse brought forward the proposal that during the second year, all men of Morehouse, as we refer to them before they graduate, men of Morehouse should be required to engage in a requisite number of community service hours. If this would be regarded as a requirement that would, in a non-academic way, count toward graduation. I endorse the spirit of that proposal. I admire it. I think it is core to the identity of what Morehouse is up to in the world. But when it becomes framed as a requirement, it becomes necessary to work it through the rules and the mechanisms of the institution. That's where we are now. The provost is supervising that conversation. Ironically, just this Monday, I meet with all the vice presidents every Monday. I ask the question, what is the status of the community service requirement, along with other wonderful ideas proposed by a group of students who call themselves the resurgence of the crown that Morehouse holds above the head of all of her students, inspiring, challenging them to grow tall enough to wear it. And the provost gave me an encouraging word with respect to where faculty are now in discussing this. So I hope to have more to report this semester on the status of that. But thank you.
I am so glad that you are here to take that challenge and to press it forward, because my own sense, I want to recommend, by the way, that you and everybody else in this kind of a setting read two books that have been getting into my heart over the last couple of months. One of them is done by a magnificent sister who is on the law faculty at Ohio State University. Her name is Michelle Alexander, and her book is called The New Jim Crow, and it deals with the whole experience of how we shall face the meaning of mass incarceration among especially our young men, but young women also in this society. I would hope that Morehouse would become, as Howard was for school integration, maybe Morehouse can take on some of these kinds of very concrete social issues so that the conscience can be focused on something specific. The second person whose book I want to recommend is Eugene Robinson's new book, columnist for the Washington Post. He has a book called Disintegration, in which he is offering the insight that what we have called the black community has been breaking up into parts and segments over the last 40, 50 years especially. And at the bottom of all the segments is that group that he calls the abandoned. Those who are just out there in the poorest and most difficult communities, in the weakest and most abject schools, and therefore being left by blacks and whites and everybody else. I want to hope, Bob, that maybe there would come a day when some of us could actually offer a community service seminar on those books and what the implications are for not only us at Morehouse now in West End, but for what people choose for their professions and vocations and purpose in life, because I think those are powerful works, and I recommend them to you and to the librarian and everybody else. The New Jim Crow and Disintegration.
Thank you, Dr. Harding. Let me just offer a brief observation about this community service and the enterprise of Morehouse students, Spelman, CAU, and other students becoming more engaged in our communities. And I've benefited greatly from the intellectual work of our own Dr. Monty Whitney, raise your hand, Dr. Whitney, on the first row here. He is the director of our Bonner Scholars Program at Morehouse, and that engages 60 wonderful students who participate in that program. But we have a number of other programs that have a specific emphasis on community service. But one of the things that I'd like to see us begin to focus on, that already evident in the Bonner and Adams Scholars, but is that what we're doing when we engage the community. And there are 5 words I want to mention and recommend to my students. The first word is that of charity. That there are a number of levels of engaging the community. And I want men of Morehouse to understand that you can move upward on this scale or across this continuum so that there's not a single solution to engaging communities for change and improvement. So charity is direct action. It's when we go out and we spend that 10 weeks giving something, sharing our lives, making an immediate impact in the lives of people whom we encounter. It may be, as Morehouse men of Morehouse made sandwiches 2 weeks ago during the ice storm, and those sandwiches were donated and provided to stranded bus passengers at the Greyhound bus station. So they didn't just throw snowballs during the during the snow break, but some of them were working, and I admire that. And that's one example of immediate response to suffering, charity. But let's scale that up. What comes next? And this is where I write the word support. The process or enterprise of support is when you go beyond immediate one-time making the sandwich for someone to engaging that person's life in a process of change where you enable, as a mentor, enable them to move to a new level in their own lives. So support is a longer term, but not permanent, a longer term than charity. Makes more demands on you. You become a mentor. You're working with a student at Booker T. Washington. You know that it's for a 9-month period during the academic year. That's support, and you are monitoring their growth, their development. Charity, support. The third level up is that of service. Write down the word service and reflect on service. Many of the students in this audience today from all of our institutions are committed to founding nonprofit organizations that provide some social service, whether it's after-school programs. The big study in a foundation report released years ago discovered that the period in which young people were getting into the most trouble, junior high, high school students, first experience with a handgun, first experimentation with risky sexual behavior, first encounter with illegal substances. This was not happening on Friday and Saturday after midnight. It surprised everyone when they said it's in the after-school hours from 3 to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. And suddenly, school leaders and community officers realized that we were not responding to the times when so-called latchkey kids and other young people were getting into trouble. So services after school that engage young people in intellectual development. Charity, support, service, scale up even more. And the more you go up the ladder, the greater the demands on you and your intellectual time and the need for you to prepare more to undertake this work seriously as a leader. This fourth level is that of what I call advocacy, or you could call it justice, or you could call it policy work, where you engage in asking the question, how can we change policy so that if 2 strikes and you're out as an official policy gets more young black boys and girls kicked out of school than others, maybe we ought to look not just at the black boys and girls who are misbehaving, let's talk about the policy that's driving them out of school into and toward the criminal justice system. So asking the policy question, what are the rules? How do they impact lives? And then the 5th level, charity, support, services, policy or advocacy or justice, whatever you call. And the 5th is the simple word transformation. And this is where this man who is pictured in this photograph, that's where his focus was. We have to radically change the way business gets done, the way we treat people who are poor, the way we provide health care, as President Obama will make this speech tonight that I expect every one of you will be listening to. Because this man is engaged in a process of social transformation and receiving all sorts of opposition. And you will all have opportunities to lead transformation. That's where you get at the roots, the radical origins and purposes of an institution and try to change what's going on, making a difference in people's lives. So I pardon that long reaction to your comment.
No, that is a wonderful one. I think that that man who is speaking tonight needs these men and women here to help him to get more deeply into that man. Because
Yes.
there is a great temptation when you get pulled into the traditional circles of the ruling communities in this country or any country, just to feel that there's no other way to go except the traditional path. And my sense is that social conscience has got to take us not only into the deep community issues that you're talking about, Bob, but social conscience now has to take us with King to ask questions about what is this country doing in the rest of the world. We are a country that has taken on what in other generations would be called an imperial role, believing that we have the answers for everybody's problem and that the answer is deeply connected to our military force. And Martin King said, no, that is not the way to go, that human beings are not improved, are not developed by the development of military force. As a matter of fact, in that Vietnam speech, King clearly said that a nation that spends more money on military defense than on social uplift and concern is facing spiritual death. It seems to me that these folks need to stand with our president to remind him of who Martin King was. That, of course, means that we have to remember who Martin King was before we can remind our dear brother Obama about who he was. And that means that some of us may even have to start reading King, like the big collected sermons, speeches, articles, interviews that are in a document like this, Testament of Hope. I would strongly urge that especially those of us who are in an educational institution, refuse to be satisfied by "I have a dream." It is wonderful. It's a magnificent thing, but you can't be an educated king lover and live on "I have a dream." There is so much more that needs to be known, needs to be experienced, and then we can go with our president to the president and talk to him about King. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Morehouse men found a way of taking King to the president and reminding the president of what King was really about, and suggesting strongly that King would not be about Afghanistan, for instance, and King would not be about trying to bomb democracy into others. That kind of social conscience, I would hope, would be part of the social conscience that we're trying to instill in these magnificent young people who are here.
Professor Harding, not only are the men of Morehouse trying to take King to the president, but we're trying to bring the president to King's school. So we're working on that, and we know that there is some interest, and we want to have that immersion. See, you have to walk this campus to really get it. It's something special about the air we breathe on the campus of Morehouse and Spelman and CAU. You have to be here. You can't get it online, right? We'll do a little online education, but you have to walk, as John Williams, our business school dean, said, it's endogenous. You got to be here to be a part of this. So I think it's an exciting time for us to be in college, in education, at a time when we have this president who at least is willing to listen and pay attention to one who was a voice of social conscience.
Maybe this is time for us to listen to some
Yes, sir.
of what others want to say or ask now, too. Some people might even want to shout or sing or throw a laptop at us, but whatever, we are inviting you to engage in the conversation now, because that's all part, as our brother reminded us at the outset, democracy lives on conversation and dialogue, not on speeches made to you, but engagement with each other. So let's take that time now to open up so that folks can talk to us and we can see what we have to say to them.
So there are two microphones here at the front. I ask you all to gather who wish to pose a question, brief questions, or make a statement, brief statements. And if you if you start making a Morehouse speech, I'm going to interrupt you because we want to allow the maximum number of speakers. So statement or a question. And while you are coming and assembling, and we will move antiphonally here, I'd like to just pose a quick question, because Dr. Harding, you are known as one who wrote speeches for Dr. King, and you referenced the I Have a Dream speech. And many of the King scholars in the room should know that the ending of the I Have a Dream speech was not the original ending, the intended end of that speech. But the question I wanted to pose to you very briefly is, when you wrote speeches for Dr. King, did he read them the way you wrote them? Did he always edit and change things? Give us just a fragment of a memory about something you wrote for this extraordinary speaker.
Bob, let me be as clear as I can that even though that term is used, that I was a speech writer for Martin, the fact is that except for a few smaller items that I did while we were in Birmingham and in Albany, I wrote one speech on Martin's behalf, and that was the speech having to do with the war in Vietnam. And I wrote that not as something that I was giving to King to say, but Martin and I, as I mentioned, had known each other for 10 years, and we had been engaged in conversations continually on issues like the role of war and the terror of war against the poor, especially. And Martin wanted to find an opportunity by the time 1967 came to speak out clearly against the war in terms of what it was doing to the poor at home and in Vietnam. And he wanted to speak out clearly as a citizen and as a man of God. He wanted to do it in a clear and precise way when he was invited to Rockefeller Riverside Church. And when he decided to accept that invitation, Martin, as usual, was traveling hundreds of thousands of miles every year, all the time. And so he thought that since I was a professor at Spelman College and didn't have much else to do, that I could write the speech and say what he and I believed. And so he put that in my hands. In that particular speech, Bob, I would say that basically everything there that I gave to him as that draft, he took and shared it with the country and with the world. And it's something that I have very mixed feelings about, because I am deeply convinced that that speech, which was given exactly 1 year before his assassination, that speech had something to do with his assassination. And so I have had to wrestle with what that means. Let me just say another word on that, because I don't often speak about this. For a time, I was really very hard on myself, asking if I had contributed to his assassination. And as I was working on that, I had the great, great fortune, blessing, to be talking on the phone to one of the great teachers of nonviolence, indeed one of Martin's teachers of nonviolence, a man named James Lawson, Reverend James Lawson, who is out in California now, but who was actually the man who invited Martin to come and stand with the garbage workers. Because James Lawson, who was a pastor at that time, was not trying to build up a massive church. He was trying to stand with the garbage workers. And he asked Martin to come and stand with him. When I told Jim about what I was wrestling with, he said to me, "Vincent, I want you to know this." I asked him, "Jim, what do you feel about having invited Martin to Memphis?" And being a wise man, he knew what I was asking. And he said, "Vincent, I want you to know that I don't take that on my shoulder, because I know that Martin wanted to come to Memphis. As a matter of fact," he said, "when I called Martin to ask him to come to Memphis, he was at a staff meeting in Atlanta. And I could hear staff members saying to him, 'Martin, we don't have time to go to Memphis. We got to take care of the Poor People's Campaign,' etc., etc., etc. And Martin very clearly said to me, 'Jim, I'm coming to Memphis. Tell the garbage workers that I'm coming to stand with them.'" That kind of clarity opened up to me the fact that Martin had asked me to say what he believed, what he knew that I knew he believed. And he was determined to speak that word. He'd simply asked me to shape the word so that he might speak it in the best possible way. I was very glad that he was able to speak the word, and people from Vietnam have said how much they appreciated Martin's willingness to stand. So that's what I would pass on as memory to you, Bob. All these wonderful people standing here. May I ask just one favor from you? That before you ask your question or make your remark, do this for me, an old professor. Give me your full name as loudly, as clearly as you can. Secondly, tell me where you spent your childhood. Thirdly, tell me your mama's full name and where she spent her childhood. Because none of us got here by ourselves. And lots of mamas are here with us, having sent us on the way. And I just want to remind you about who you're traveling with.
Wonderful.
And then finally, what are you doing at Morehouse? And then say what you have to say. But see, I need to know who you are in order to understand the question. One, your name, where you spent your childhood, your mama's name, where she spent her childhood, what you're doing here at Morehouse. You didn't know you were getting into it, did you? That's what you get when you stand up at Morehouse College.
All right, brother, who's ready? Which of you want to start, please?
My name is Nicholas Upshaw.
Speak.
Into the mic.
My name is Nicholas Upshaw.
Is the mic working?
Our team is going to adjust that.
My name is Nicholas Upshaw from Atlanta, Georgia. I go to Morehouse College, 2014. My grandmother's name is Betty Jo Robinson, and she's from Atlanta, Georgia as well.
And keep speaking to the mic.
I was here to make a suggestion. If the requirement for community service is established, make it a leadership course such as Crown Forum or Freshman Oath that we can take and make a think tank for the whole school to participate in.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Okay.
My name is Jamal Thomas, Jamal Alfonso Thomas. I'm from Gary, Indiana, majoring in business administration. My grandmother's name is Dorothy Thomas. She's from Arkansas. My question is, in writing that speech, did you all reach your full expectations from what you wanted to get out of the speech?
Jamal, tell me what your major is.
Business administration and
Business
management.
administration. Okay, I want you to be a very unusual business administration major and go back to 1968 newspapers. Okay? And look at some of the newspapers that were published the few days after that speech. I'm sorry, 67. 1967, April. The speech was April 4th, 1967. Look at April 5th, 6th, 7th. And that begins to answer the question of did the speech produce what Martin was hoping? On many levels, the answer is no. The speech immediately produced great opposition from the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time magazine, and the leaders of some powerful African American organizations. Why that was the case, that's another whole time that we would have together. But Martin never backed down from that position. He had to oppose the President of the United States on that issue. And he did it. He stood up because he believed in what he was saying and doing. And I expect you, Jamal, to develop that practice in your life too, not to back down. when others say that you can't say that, that's not right, you don't have the right to say that. You have to be Jamal and say what you believe is in your heart. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jamal.
My name is Marquez Terrell Harris.
What's the first name?
Marquez Terrell Harris.
Marquez.
I apologize.
Okay.
I'm from right here in Atlanta, Georgia. My grandmother's name is Eunice Turner. She's from a little country town about 45 to an hour south called Griffin, Georgia.
Griffin, okay.
Yeah. I'm a freshman philosophy major here at Morehouse College. My question is basically, I understand the importance of a man, especially a man seeking an active role in society, having a social conscience. But one can then take it further, or at least I can take it. I took it further and said that even though a man has that social conscience, he has to actively act upon what he feels that social conscience is saying to him. My question then to you is that although we have that social conscience, how do we know what to act upon and how far we should take it in order to get those desired results?
You want me to start that?
You're the guest, yes.
I'm the elder, so I get a chance to move forward. Because that is a powerful issue that we are constantly given the privilege to struggle with. How do we know what to do when our conscience is telling us we need to do something about this situation? My own experience leads me to suggest that there are two important paths to find a way on that one. One is to move without fear into ourselves and to begin to find some ways of turning off all the stuff that's going on all around us or the stuff that's going on in our hands constantly and listen to what's coming out of here. Because if we listen, we will discover all kinds of messages that we couldn't get when we weren't listening. That's one thing, to begin to develop the practice of listening to what is happening inside of us and what voices are speaking to us, from our grandmamas to the great spirits of the universe. The second thing, though, is almost the opposite of that, but not really the opposite, and that is to look around us and to see if we can figure out who are the other brothers and sisters who are wrestling with some of the same things that we are. And as quickly as possible, get close to them. Bring them close to you. The path of social conscience is not a Lone Ranger path, even though we picture him too often as a Lone Ranger. It's a path of working together. We build the beloved community by being the beloved community. And what we do, Morehouse, is to try to find other people with whom we can build community through sharing our struggles, through sharing our questions. Sister, brother, here's what I'm trying to work on. What do you think about this? Let's sit and talk about this just for half an hour or so and see where we come to. Those two things, going inside, going outside. And I would guess that what we will find out is that that magnificent outsider called Jesus the Christ was not fooled or fooling when he said, if you keep hungering and thirsting after the right way, let yourself have that hunger, you will be filled.
It's absolutely important that the 400 to 500 men that we graduate every year, each one of them carry out into the world
Yes.
the Morehouse ethos,
Yes.
the Morehouse mystique, the Morehouse commitment, but to personal excellence, to integrity, to caring about the least advantaged members of the community, to raising the ethical question, to opening opportunities for those who are less fortunate, and who comport themselves in a fashion that inspires hope in communities that need to see hopeful role models. So brothers who just get up and go to work, and if you don't have a job, you get up and go looking for a job. Brothers who are mentoring, volunteering, working with scouts, working with teams. Brothers who, those who choose to commit themselves to a partner, who get married, who rear their families, who are good fathers. I mean, that's revolutionary action in this day. And I would love to see all of our graduates go forth with that. And if they do that, and if they do it well, and in the spirit of Mays, do it as well as anyone who has ever lived or died, then there will be more giants who emerge.
Thank you.
And I'm holding you accountable for that.
Good evening. My name is Quincy Young from Camden, New Jersey. My mother's name is Joyce Francis. She's from Clarendon, Jamaica. My major here at Morehouse is physical education, sports studies with a minor in journalism. I have a question for both President Franklin and Dr. Hardin. My question for Mr. Hardin is, what do you think can be done? I feel like the biggest disadvantage, the most underprivileged people in society, in American society today, are young black males that are a product of the education, the public education system. What can be done differently in the public education system to make sure that more than 50% of black males graduate from high school? And for President Franklin, the ideas that we do have, men of Morehouse do have, where can we go with them to make sure that they are fulfilled and that they are mapped out and put into play?
Tell us your first name again.
Quincy.
Quincy, thank you. Quincy, I think you raise one of the great issues of our time, education for those who are, quote, least helped by the society. Who is going to take on their needs and make them our needs? Quincy, I think that we start just by shaping the question in that way. Those folks who are in trouble in the educational system are us, and not somebody else. They are us. And if we can begin thinking that way, then we have begun the move towards some answers. What came to me as you were speaking was, what would happen if Morehouse or some part of Morehouse just adopted a group of young men, whether at George Washington, Booker T. Washington, or any place else, if a group of Morehouse men said, starting from their freshman year, I am not going to go through this process by myself. I am going to be moving through this educational process with my arms around a young brother right there at Booker T, and we are going to graduate together. If there could be that willingness to take unusual steps, not to look for some ordinary path that's already there, but to start being creative about this great need that there is in our country today. You guys are our hope. We need you to think out of the box, not to get into the ordinary ways even before you're 21. Start thinking ordinarily. We don't need that. We need extraordinary ideas. And one of them is just to, again, get together with other brothers and say, how are we going to get hands-on now? That's on the very most personal level. On the larger levels that our president was speaking about before, how do we get to the Board of Education? How do we get to the elected officials of our society generally? How do we start creating new ways of thinking about education? All of that is what you're here for. You've got time for that now here. Don't feel that you came here to do something that's set up just like that and you stick yourself into it and you walk like that. This is a place to be adventurous and to try stuff that you never dreamed of, that nobody ever dreamed of before, and then see where it goes. Okay? We're leaving that in your hands. You want to talk to the president now.
Before you answer my question, Dr. Franklin, the idea that you were saying that we can step outside the box and that it's on us. I'm a product of a program that basically walked me through high school and made it easier for me to go through high school. Now, I have ideas about how to impact my community like that, but where do I go on this campus to try to put them into play? Because I've been places and people have told me, oh, you better just get yours and don't worry about all this other stuff, or you'll be here forever, and a number of other things. So where can I go to try to make this social impact that I have implanted in my heart and my mind?
Thank you, Quincy. Let me say very briefly, first of all, there are 14 brothers standing up. I'm going to ask no others join the line at this time, because we should get out of here before midnight. So no others should join the line, first of all. Next, Dr. Harden, do you see why I have the best job in higher education
wonderful,
in the world?
Yes.
Is working with these extraordinary young men. And the faculty and staff of Morehouse have the absolute privilege to serve these young men.
Yes.
And we are energized and inspired by what they say. Quincy, very briefly, first of all, you all are aware that the United States Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, will be on this campus this coming Monday, January 31st, noon to 1:30. Meet me there. Where? At the Ray Charles Performing Arts Center. This is one of the first big programs we're going to do in what we call Ray Pack. So I'll be looking for you all noon. Do not embarrass me. There are 550 seats in there. I want them filled. Already 200 high school students and public school students are coming from around the city with their teachers. This is going to be a national event. People are going to be tuning in. Lots of reporters. Everyone will be there, so be there. I'd like to introduce you and the brothers who are part of the education group here on campus to the Secretary of Education. Also note that in Atlanta, you all know that when President Benjamin Elijah Mays left Morehouse after 27 years, he went and served as president of the Board of Education here in Atlanta. Okay? So he took note of and cared about high school and junior high and elementary students. And he served as chair. Right now, on the 9-member school board, there are 2 Morehouse men. The chair, Katim L., and Courtney English. So you all should know we have linkages to the Board of Education. There's great controversy at this time. This might be an interesting time for men of Morehouse to engage those 2 brothers and say, how can we support, how can we help, and also hold them accountable to do the right thing and provide progressive leadership, as I believe they're attempting to do. More directly, please bring your ideas to SGA, to Dr. Bynum. If there are things that need to reach me and the provost, we'd like to be responsive. But one of the dynamic things that's happening on this campus is some of the best and brightest students in this student body, Dr. Harding, are saying we want to, before we go to business school, medical school, law school, engineering, education, arts. Before we do that, we're going to go and spend a year teaching in a local school. because right now only 3% of America's public school teachers are African American men.
Yes.
17% of the students in elementary and high school students in this country are African American. 17%. We're only 13% of the nation's population. But of all those in school, 17% are black folk. 3% are male teachers. So Secretary Duncan is coming here to ring the bell. Spike Lee, Jeff, Brother Jeff from BET, and others will be with him Monday to make this part of the national campaign. And I'd love for you all to be there. Going into the classrooms is one of the revolutionary actions you can take nowadays to help turn the school system around. And some of you will want to stay, become career teachers, superintendents, and leaders of these systems. Thank you, Quincy. We need to keep moving.
Thank you, Quincy, very much.
Is this mic on? Speak directly in, and take it out and hold it if you need to. The battery could have died. Do you have a Morehouse voice yet? Can you project so that the last person in the last row in the corner can hear you?
My question is for Dr. Hardy. My question is, you spoke as President Obama giving them the views of Dr. King on the Foreign Policy Institute, and I wondered, how is the President sworn to business to protect the national security interests of the country and making Dr. King is largely national law, particularly in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Yemen, where there have been unveiled many plots to kill the United States America.
Thank you, thank you. Tell me your first name again. Chris. Chris has put forward the quintessential comparative way of looking at these issues. How do you deal with, quote, national security needs in the way that King was saying he believes is necessary for a country to become a greater country? Chris, here again, we cannot be satisfied with accepting all of the old definitions. For instance, you must ask, what is security? Is security simply that which can be purchased with a gun? How do people become secure? Have you ever seen a baby when she or he is really secure? They're secure because they know that they are surrounded by folks who love them, care for them, are willing to do anything to protect them. It may be, Chris, that the president, wise man that he is, needs to think some more about how do you become secure, truly secure, and can your security be bought at the price of the insecurity of others? All of those are issues that you should be thinking about. Accept no simple answers, including coming from here. Complexify everything, because then that gives your brain more opportunity to work at it. My sense is that right now, we need to redefine what national security means. Are we secure when our schools are as messed up as they are? Is that a secure nation? I think we have to ask those kinds of questions.
Thank you.
The level of seriousness, for instance, of the Morehouse campus, the number of brothers who are committed to service and political activism and so on, versus the party quotient, is really about the same. And as I read Dr. Mays' speeches, it was about the same then. We may romanticize about how serious it was, but there's some alums here, Ron, you brothers can speak to it. You know, you always had the mix. And you know, this is a time when brothers were maturing. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried that we don't have 100% of the 2,700 students here really thoroughly engaged. Some of them, if we impose the community service requirement, it won't stick for some of them. They'll begrudge, they'll hate it. They'll say, I wish I didn't have to do this. That's okay. I'm concerned about what it is you learn in the process of reflection. With respect to the issue of if there was no Dr. King, I still believe in the power of this Morehouse ethos. We didn't have to have this kind of monumental giant. There would still have been these extraordinary men emerging from this community of learning and inquiry and research who would make an impact on history. So Dr. Harding, you have an impossible job now. In 4 minutes, if you could give a summative statement, and then Dr. Crawford is going to come back with a wrap-up comment.
Thank you, brothers, very, very much for caring enough to share and to ask. For the last young brother who asked about bibliography, I heard somebody in the community here.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Did you see brother who raised her hand? Right here. She says, come to her. She can help you. That's even better than the guy up on the stage who is leaving in a few days doing the help. That's why we come together to develop these connections right where we are. She's going to help you. I would simply offer this one example that I think you should get your hands on if you really want to sample King beyond I Have a Dream. James Washington's Testimony of Hope, the collected writings, speeches, sermons of Martin Luther King Jr. No one should consider themselves knowledgeable about King without having dug deeply into that work. I want to just say something else about the powerful question that was asked, was his death timely or untimely? My response is, you will decide that. And I want to end with a poem because I love poetry. My daughter is a poet. She, by the way, is coming to speak at Spelman on Thursday. Some of you all ought to check her out. In this book of mine, Martin Luther King, The Inconvenient Hero, I quote a poet who I think has an important word to all of us who are asking the questions verbally and non-verbally. Now that he is safely dead, let us praise him. Build monuments to his glory. Sing hosannas to his name. Dead men make such convenient heroes. They cannot rise to challenge the images we would fashion from their lives. And besides, it is easier to build monuments than to make a better world. I want to send you forth with that task of being the monuments yourself and building the better world. I need you. Folks who are coming need you. Folks who you can't imagine need you to be something more than just I, me people, but to become people who live with a deep consciousness of your calling, as King says, to do something for others. I'm so glad that we've been able to have this chance, Bob, to engage each other and to engage the community. I'm looking forward to the next gatherings that we're going to have together. I'm especially urging as many of you as can to come and see the new film that I want to be showing whatever day it is, I don't know. Is that tomorrow?
She's going
Okay.
to announce it.
Sister Vicky's going to announce it. Go and be strong and do what you have to do. Before Sister Vicky announces it, let me give you one little story, because I always have to tell stories. I was in my town where I live in Denver on a Martin Luther King Day in a junior high school. And I told the young people about the King that I knew as friend and brother. And I mentioned just in passing that during the last years of his life, Martin knew that he could be taken out at any moment. He knew that. And when I was finished and was getting ready to leave, a group of the young men gathered around me. These were 13, 14-year-old young brothers, and primarily of some sisters as well. And one of the young men came up to me and said, Dr. Harding, I got a question. I want to ask you something. And I said, yes, what is it? And he said, well, if Dr. King knew that he could be killed at any time for what he was doing, why didn't he just chill out? And I was trying to figure out how I was going to talk to this young brother about what commitment means to what you deeply believe in. And before I could say a word, this young sister comes running up to me and says to him and says to me, what you mean, chill out? Chill out. How could he chill out? He had work to do. That's my word to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harding, and thank you, President Franklin. See, I promised you it was going to be a very enlightening conversation. And I just want to say that please pick up Dr. Harding's books, because Hope and History, While We Must Tell the Story of the Movement. I ran across that book in Northampton, Massachusetts about 20 years ago, and it just really, there was so much there that struck me and resonated, and he's so much wisdom. We are delighted that he's going to be on the campus for the next couple of days, so you have an opportunity to re-engage with him and all of these wonderful questions that you had. So please come out tomorrow evening. He will be engaging in dialogue following the film Soundtrack for a Revolution. That'll be here in this room from 6 to 8 o'clock tomorrow. Now, if President Franklin would come forward with Dr. Harding, would come back to the podium, we have a special honor.
If you all will just give us one moment, it's very important for us to honor our friend and our teacher properly, and I'm going to shorten this process. But Dr. Harding, we are hereby conferring upon you, if you would be generous enough to accept, a special honor developed by Dean Lawrence Carter and the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel. It is known as the Gandhi King Aikeda Award. These three extraordinary leaders, a Hindu, a Christian, a Buddhist, Gandhi King Aikeda, and it is given to members of the community who demonstrate the principles of peace, nonviolence as a product of a vital, energetic life. Today, you shared with us a story that you do not share in many audiences, and we will remember this as a special day as you talked about the pangs of conscience, as you wrote a speech that in some ways was a part of the drama of history of Dr. King's assassination, And you grappled with that quietly. That's the voice of individual conscience when you struggle inside. But you also have a social conscience where you focus on what's right and good for society, not just for me. And it seems to me that the social conscience said, Martin has work to do, I have to help him do it in writing this speech. Although your individual conscience said, I don't know if this was right to do. You really embody the struggle that all of us should be grappling with every day. And so in that spirit, we place upon you this honor. And we thank you for accepting this Gandhi King Ikeda Award. There is a certificate that goes along with this that I ask you to. We're going to take a photo op so we can remember this 100 years from today.
We will not be around, but we guarantee you.
And we thank you. And do you wish to simply say thank you? And that will.
I will just say thank you. That is all. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.